Raian is going to fight Ryuki one-on-one, potentially Koga one-on-one, which is going to be very interesting to see. I don't think this will go normally given the circumstances of the chapter and when this fight is actually happening, but I think we are going to reach the peak of this training arc that we are currently on right now, because there's an even bigger fight that is teased in this chapter that I'll talk about in this chapter, starting off with the title that is called Nice to Meet You. And it starts off with basically the news recapping the events that we saw happen to Luohan. A lot of public eyes were on this, obviously. Cameras were everywhere. The death dealers are kind of famous in terms of stopping the terrorists that are the worm, at least to the public eye. So it's no real surprise, especially when you factor in Jan's plan here, or at least what Luohan assumed Jan's plan was, and he's sort of proven right in this chapter. But we get a recap from the news of what had happened. Luohan got attacked as he came to Japan, and the man was simply arrested. But then we have, of course, they consult a counter-terrorist specialist who is going to give their input on whether or not this was actually an attack by the worm, at least for the public, for them to understand, to get the gist of the situation in terms of how important or unimportant this is. And I think it's clear to see that this guy is clearly on Jan's payroll, because he plays down the entire event. He basically says it can't be the worm because they didn't actually use weapons, and most of the terrorism that we've seen the worm do was using weapons. And he adds on to the fact that, of course, Luohan isn't actually a public figure per se, and he basically tries to write this out as a crime of opportunity, which does not really make that much of sense, honestly. Like, the worm can still use people to murder other people without weapons. That really doesn't make any sense. But I do think because of this, I think it does show that what Luohan was saying to Nico about if he had actually murdered Lucky Boy and Scarface on camera, this would have been spun to basically get death dealers cancelled and Luohan cancelled, basically trying to cripple their power as much as possible so that Jan would probably be able to take them out more swiftly, right? Because they would probably lose their leverage, that is the nukes, of course. But enough of the news, we then transition over to the mountains area in Japan, and it is Falcon and our boy Rito. And of course Rito's like, hey, we are in some scary times. Now I'm not sure what he means by this, but of course it probably has to do with the global tensions that are probably very real in the Kengan verse right now. You have the worms and the nukes that are out there and this is all happening around Japanese soil. So I can understand him speaking as a citizen and potentially as someone who of course knows some information of what's happening, at least behind the scenes, because he should know that, oh yeah, death dealers and the worm are sort of in cahoots, right? But Oma is also at the mountains. He seems to be training, but we don't see who he's training with specifically here, because we see Rito call out to Oma saying, of course, hey, has he made lunch? But it's actually his turn. But as Oma is, standing there, stanced up, doing something, he gets a call. And of course, we know this call is probably from Yamashita, which turns out it is, and it's about exactly what we all think about. Yamashita probably got in contact with Lucky Boy and Scarface after they went into the police station. Of course, Scarface and Lucky Boy want to talk to their brothers, either Oma or Ryuki. Oma's the guy they got. So Oma, he walks out of training, he goes to basically see them. And it seems to be raining as well outside. That's another detail that's also pretty interesting. But he goes to the police station, and this is where we get the title of the chapter itself, because Scarface tried to say, oh, hey brother, how are you, or it's nice to meet you. But Lucky Boy is quick to remind Scarface that, we don't really know Oma like that, so it is what it is. Probably a bit too awkward to jump into saying, hey brother. So Scarface is like, yeah, you're right, I should probably just stick to nice to meet you. But they're getting right to the point. They want to tell Oma how to beat Shen Luohan, which teases the potential fight itself, Oma versus Luohan. This would be very interesting to get right before the big match with Shen Wulong, because I think it would set the stage for who is more likely to fight Shen Wulong if it's a 1v1. Because I think most people can see Oma as one of the bigger runners for Shen Wulong's opponent here. And the next best thing, if not the best thing de facto, is Luohan. Yes, we have Kuroki Gensai there. Yes, we have Agito as well, who's had some very big buffs and will probably get much stronger through this time skip as well. But in terms of the people we are focusing on now, besides of course Koga and Ryuki, who I do not think will fight Shen Wulong, at least not if it's a one-on-one type of match, then I think the battle for who gets to challenge the top of the verse comes down to the both of them. And so it will be very interesting to see, hey, does Oma either take the advice, or does he say, nah, I don't want to hear it, I'll just go fight Shen Luohan myself? Because we don't get to see this scene go any further, it stops right there. But remember, Nico is Luohan's partner, so we could also get Oma versus Nico with Shen Wulong's techniques here. Massive potential either way, assuming of course Oma can actually find them. But that's it for the scene. As I've said, we transition over to the Kure HQ, which is also the very next day. We see the sun rising and everything, and we see the doors opening for the place as well, and Koga and Ryuki walk out of that place, Koga screaming at the top of his lungs that he is happy that they actually managed to complete the training. They're back on the street. They no longer have to look at the walls of that damn mansion, getting their asses beat every 5 seconds. And Ryuki's like, hey, you sound like you've just gotten out of prison, which it probably felt like that to him. Ryuki's probably been in worse situations though. But either way, this indicates that, yeah, they managed to complete the training, it seems. And Koga's like, hey, he likes to thank or wants to thank the Kure clan, or is thanking the Kure clan. And he says, hey, now he's more prepared to take the stage, right? But Ryuki's like, hey, this is just the beginning. We still got growing to do. You know, we still got a ways to go. Forward and upward, baby. So they're both hyped. They're like, yeah, they're looking at their future already here. And we see Hollows, Fosu, Yakusha, and Kurara. They're all there looking at them basically go away at this point and are, you know, happy that they actually managed to pull through. Now, by the looks of it, they seem to have actually survived the 24 hours and maybe not eliminate everyone. Although we might get flashbacks specifically, because there were ways to basically beat the training without necessarily going to the full 24 hours, because you could eliminate the Kure clan members and they couldn't be replaced because of that. But Hollows does hint to the fact that they did more than just stay for the 24 hours. In fact, he says they went for the prize. I just need to remember what that prize was. But it seems like they probably eliminated everyone as well. But Kurara's like, hey, you know, they're good guys, you know, they're good little boys. I wonder if we did enough for them to survive. And Hollows is like, hey, it is what it is. These are grown ass men. We just need to have faith in them from this point on. Basically, Hollows is like, hey, we did what we could. From this point on, it's up to life to help them grow. And we then focus more on Koga and Ryuki here, and they're talking about what they're going to be doing from this point, because again, there's still so much time left before the end of the training, at least in universe wise. And we see Ryuki saying he wants to go and spar with Cosmo, because he's wanted to do that for a very long time, which is very interesting. But Koga says he wants to go to the SJPW, which is basically where Sekabayashi are, Jose, and the rest of the wrestling gang. So he seems like he wants to center on that as well. You know, kind of going along the same steps as Oma in terms of how he started out. But we see Raian tried to take a cheap shot, which turns out to be a scissors kick. At least that's what I think it is, where it's like the stop motion. You basically lift up one of your legs up high and you just stomp it down. And both Koga and Ryuki step out of that no problem. Reflexes still fresh. And Raian, he acknowledges this. He's like, yeah, you still have pretty fast reflexes. And Koga's like, yeah, of course we would have actually seen that coming because he's admitting a lot of bloodlust, and add on to the fact that they're literally just out of the training, so their reaction speed is probably just as sharp. And Raian's like, at least the Kure clan's little game did you a little bit of good, basically. And we see this very intense panel of Kure Raian, which again furthers the idea that Koga was saying he was emitting a lot of bloodlust here. So he's wanted to go at them for a while, it seems, and of course we knew that from the moment he stepped in, right? Man has been wanting to whip their asses, and it seems like he probably wasn't a part of the training after that initial day when he was there, because logically speaking he would have been able to have this opportunity a lot earlier. But Raian wants to plant his fists in their faces now. 2v1 basically, and we see Koga start to take his stance, but then put his hands in his pocket and turn back, putting his back against, or turning his back to Kure Raian. Of course, Kure Raian, he's acting like, hey, why are you turning your back on me? But Ryuki takes that opportunity to try to kick Raian on the head, which of course doesn't work. He says, yeah, I caught on to that, obviously. I could see that coming a mile away. So we see here the ingenuity of Koga and Ryuki at work real early in this, which I think is important to keep in mind. But Koga then says, while he's sitting down on the side of the road, it seems, that hey, you probably wanted us to team up against you, but we're not gonna do that. You're gonna fight us 1v1, one at a time. Mano to mano, basically. And Raian is like, oh really? Then no take backs on that promise, basically. And the chapter ends with that. Raian is looking at Ryuki, Ryuki is stanced up, and we're potentially getting a 1v1 that I think is not really going to be a 1v1. Now the reason I say that is, I've got really two reasons at this point. The first one is that when Koga and Ryuki got out of this training, they still have their bruises and stuff. So they're not at 100%, right? In the drafts, they don't have the same type of scars, but of course, those are the drafts. It's safe to say they're really not going to be in the position after taking multiple days of beatings that they're going to be able to square up 1v1 against Kure Raian. Call me skeptical with that one. But there's also the fact, and this is number two, we're right off of the training where they said they should fight smarter. And I think we also got an indication of that right off the bat of this fight. Koga made himself a little distraction, and Ryuki took advantage of that. I think we're gonna see some very similar work here of them trying to take down Raian, and I think they might actually do it. I have my hopes up. 60%, I'm going to push it up to 70%. My boys pull through and manage to land a dub against Raian, and not a full-on defeat because it's Raian, he still has a lot of potential in future for the story, but a display that is good enough where they can sort of pull ahead in terms of portrayal as a team. But yeah, that is the video. Don't forget to like and sub, and until next time, take it easy.